right, welcome to our May 22nd Community College Consortium for Open Educational Resources webinar. And it's my pleasure to be here. I'm Una Daly from the Community College Consortium with the public speaking course team from the Open Course Library in Washington State. And we'll have Ellen Bremen, an instructional designer, Phil Venditti, the instructor, and one of Phil's students, Edison Justiano, speaking with us today. Just before we get started, I'm going to give you a few little tips about Illuminate. I assume many of you have used it before, but just to go over a few things to keep in mind. If you are listening in a noisy area to this webinar, we ask that you do a *6 on your phone, or in fact, you can turn off your microphone entirely if you're on a computer in a noisy area and just listen to the speakers. So thank you for that, because everyone will be able to hear your background noise with it. All right. And over on the left-hand side, you'll see of your screen, you'll see the participants who are here. And at this point, we have 32 participants, which is really exciting. I know we have a large number of folks from Washington State who are here supporting the Open Course Library, and that's really exciting. But I'm going to ask in a minute about where other folks are from as well. Directly underneath the participants window, you'll see a number of hand gestures and smiley faces, and you can use those if you like to comment silently but positively on what's going on here today. Directly underneath that is the chat window, and we encourage you to ask questions in the chat window as we're going through the presentation. We may take a few questions in between speakers. It kind of depends on how timing works out, and we will definitely have time at the end for your questions. So go ahead and put them in the chat window, and by typing into that little area right above the send button, and then you can click send. And then directly underneath that, at the very bottom, is the audio. And I know many of you are on the computer, and so if you later at the end of this presentation would like to pose your questions through audio as opposed to typing into the chat window, then we're going to have you click on your microphone to turn it on and speak. And but we'll do that at the end. So for now, probably you should have your mic off unless you're a presenter. All right. If you haven't had a chance, please do introduce yourself in the chat window. Tell us what college or organization you're with, and anything about open educational resources that you'd like to share. So I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind telling folks where you're from. And since the Community College Consortium for Open Educational Resources joined the Open Courseware Consortium, which is a global organization worldwide, I have a map here of the entire world. And if you would look at your screen at your big whiteboard, and where all the little buttons are directly directly to the side of the map, if you pick up the one that looks like a wand, has a little sparkly thing on the end of it, you can put where you're located. And I see we mostly have West Coast people. Oh, we've got Florida, and we've got somebody up in the central area, I think like Ohio, and we've got East Coast. Okay, excellent. So it looks like we're primarily a U.S. group today. We possibly have someone up here in Alaska, it's looking like, which is exciting. And if I misspoke where you're from, go ahead and type it directly into the chat window as well. Thanks for sharing that. One other quick question I wanted to ask folks was, how did you hear about today's webinar? This helps us with our efforts for outreach to know what's the most effective way. And you can answer that by clicking in your participants window at the bottom right. You'll see A, B, C, D, E, and it allows you to answer this question, A being Community College Consortium for Open Educational Resources, B being the College Open Textbooks website, C being OCW Consortium, D, did you hear about it over Twitter, or E, through the @ONE training site, which is in California. So I see a number of you have answered, and if your choice isn't in there, then we just ask you to go ahead and type it in the chat window. Okay, so interesting. So it looks like most of you heard about it through through either the consortium or the College Open Textbook site. All right, well, thank you for that. None of the above. Okay, heard about it through the, all right, thank you, Jerry. And there were a couple of choices here that weren't mentioned. All right, so what are we going to do this morning? Well, I just have a few updates for you on the Community College Consortium, and then we'll get right into our main presentation here with the Open Course Library Public Speaking team, and that'll be from an instructional design point of view, then from teaching public speaking, and finally a student perspective. And Ellen and Phil, who are the faculty who will be speaking, are going to have kind of a interesting discourse, and in some cases they may be weaving in and out of each other's presentations since they both were very involved in the production of the public speaking course. For those of you who might be new to the Community College Consortium, our mission is promoting the adoption of open educational resources to enhance teaching and learning, with our primary tenets being expanding access to higher education. We support professional development for faculty, of which this webinar is part of that. And finally, we advance the community college mission. Our focus is primarily community college, but of course we welcome all colleges to participate, but our focus remains those first 2 years of college and the mission of community colleges. For those of you who might be attending some webinars in the next month or so, we will be at the Association of College and Research Libraries in Iowa, actually on Friday this week. Kate Hess from one of the members of our advisory group will be attending there. Next month, in the middle of the month, we'll have quite a number of our California folks who will be attending the online teaching conference in California. And let us know if you're going to be at conferences over the summer, and we will help to publicize that, and so that you can meet up with like-minded folks who are involved in OER. So at this point, I just want to give a very brief introduction before I turn this over to Ellen. So the Washington Open Course Library was started about 2.5 years ago in Washington State. Washington State had a vision, along with the Gates Foundation and, of course, the Washington State Board of Community and Technical Colleges, that developing a library of the top 81 highest enrolled courses would be an excellent project for open education from a number of perspectives. Number one, it would lower textbook costs for students, along with helping course completion rates and graduation rates for students who are so heavily impacted by the costs of educational materials today. It was also an effort to produce materials for faculty. And Washington State decided that this made a lot of sense from the point of view of their state alone. Developing these courses using high-quality open educational resources and instructional design and accessibility principles would provide not only the faculty who developed them, but other faculty within Washington State with excellent resources for our highest impact courses. And now, as of last fall, the Open Course Library is sharing the first 41 of these courses with the world, essentially, because they're openly licensed. Although they were developed in Washington State, they are now available to community college, educator, students, and any other interested learner throughout the world. All right, at this point, I'd like to introduce Ellen Bremen. Ellen is an instructional designer and a communications professor. She's been teaching for over 14 years, primarily at community colleges, and she's received many awards for her teaching. Her most recent award was the 2011 Sloan C. Consortium Award for Excellence in Online Teaching. And currently, she's the Quality Assurance Manager for the entire Open Course Library. So Ellen knows this area intimately, and I'd like to turn it over to Ellen at this point.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. So I think I can move this along myself. Okay, great. So since Una already discussed some of the background about the Open Course Library, I'll just go ahead and jump to some of the parts that you haven't heard, and then I'll move directly into the section about developing some of the challenges of developing the public speaking course in particular. So Phil and I can spend a little bit of time, extra time, talking about that, some of the challenges of developing that course between a more, I guess you can call traditional community college and a technical college. But as Una said, this was originally the Gates Foundation, a partnership between the Gates Foundation and the Washington State Legislature in an effort to improve college completion rates, because let's face it, these 81 highly enrolled courses are those 100 and 200 level courses that our students don't necessarily jump up for joy to take, right? I mean, like I think about our Public Speaking 101 course, and that's the course that students typically dread. They'd rather have surgery without anesthesia than take that particular course. And then on top of that, they have these, $500 textbooks along with these courses that they're not typically thrilled to take. But then along comes this partnership with the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges, and this opportunity to develop these open course materials for these 81 highly enrolled courses. So interestingly, these courses have 320,000 enrollments per year. So then the challenge comes in of how do you create course materials that cost no more than $30 to the students. And when we're talking about course materials, let's just focus on what that includes. That includes for the faculty member everything from the syllabus all the way to the reading materials, all the way then to the learning activities, to the assessments, just everything that a faculty member might use for a course. Our goal was to have just a complete package for faculty and to have those materials align, to have objectives that to have course objectives and module objectives, and then to have all of the learning materials make sense within those objectives and align to those objectives. And if you're hearing buzzwords that sound very similar to Quality Matters, then that's a very similar model to what we are thinking about is that kind of alignment. So we wanted these materials to be digitized, fully digitized, but also accessible for use in a face-to-face, online, or hybrid environment. And so I'm seeing a question here, if the OCL courses, I'm just going to jump here and answer this question. Do the OCL courses include any multimedia-based tutorials that orient the students to each course? The materials will include course guides that orient the faculty to the courses. But again, the materials are able to be used for face-to-face, online, or hybrid courses. So they're not necessarily, they're able to be used in whatever modality Tanjul, hello. Tom and I go way back. So they're able to be used in whatever modality the faculty member is already teaching them in. But there is a course guide that will enable the faculty member to be able to know how to teach that course, how the faculty designer has envisioned that course. And Phil will speak more to the course guide for his course. So the student would only need to be oriented to the course based on the adopting faculty's vision, if that makes sense, based on the adopting faculty's vision of how they were already running that course, not necessarily the faculty course designer. All that would need to be is faculty, if that makes any sense at all, which maybe it doesn't, but if you have another question, go ahead and post it. So anyhow, for phase 1, which was last academic year, those courses are being used by colleges in, you can see the stats here. The public speaking professor in me is not necessarily inclined to read this, but it's so 8 states, and the materials have been accessed 30,000 times and from over 125 different countries. And for phase 2, you can see the number of involved people. And what's really, really exciting is that these courses are actually currently just finishing up their second round of review by over 60 subject matter experts. And so that is really just very exciting. So it's been an extremely exciting project to just all the way around. I've been involved for 2 years, and so has Phil Venditti, and we are. It's been an exhilarating project to be a part of. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move on to the challenges in putting together a public speaking course from 2 very different worlds. You think 2-year college to 2-year college. Well, they're very different, as Phil and I both learned. I am with Highline Community College, which is, just very, I realized a very traditional community college. Our public speaking 220 course is common course number. We have common course numbering with University of Washington. It's a direct transfer course. Where students would not have to retake that course going into University of Washington, and I know Clover Park Technical College has the same course. However, when Phil and I looked at our curriculum, we realized that, my goodness, it's actually very, very different curriculum. We have completely different information literacy uses. We have very, very different speeches, and as we were looking at what would go in the open course library, we had some very spirited conversations. And Phil, I said to Phil, I think that for this section, I think we should really both have some dialogue on how those conversations went down. And I said, Phil was saying, we need to have representation for people out there who have, similar aims and goals to what he has on the vocational side. And I said, well, what about faculty out there who have the information literacy needs that I have? And, it's kind of like back to Donnie and Marie, for those that are a little bit country and a little bit rock and roll. I mean, so we had to kind of find this choreography of what will be a menu of items for faculty out there who could pick and choose assignments that would work for their varied audiences. Phil, do you want to come in?
Yeah. I think one example came early on when I visited you at your college and was talking about our second speech. Now, in our course, we do 7 speeches, which is also pretty unusual, I think, in a traditional community college. But the second speech is a demonstration speech. And I remember you're saying, you mean you let the people deal with manipulatives that early in the course? And, of course, in a technical college, most students are very comfortable manipulating items. They want to do it, and they're learning to do it better through their studies here. So for them, it's really a relief early in the quarter to do something that involves manipulatives, whereas I think that might very well be something that you'd want to postpone reasonably in a traditional transfer-oriented course. For us, I mean, for my department is very big on making sure that students are able to use information literacy. I mean, in a second speech, my department wants to make sure that students know about the difference between scholarly and popular sources. So in terms of
in terms of manipulatives, I mean, if I had students doing demonstration speeches as a second speech, my department would have a real issue with that, because they would say, well, where is the information literacy component, and how are we going to be sure that if they're going on to the University of Washington that they are able to know what a solid source is? That would be a far more important component.
Well, in many cases, I think it's a matter of emphasis and timing, because in the course as we teach it here, as I teach it here, we certainly do talk about that, and the students I've always expected the students to do readings and to annotate them and so forth. But you were really helpful in saying, look, at Highline, nobody gives a speech without mentioning the sources that he or she has read. And I haven't been doing that. I've been recommending it but not requiring it. So I owe you a debt of gratitude for making it clear that that is something that students ought to do.
Definitely. So you know, and what's interesting is that I told Phil that when I was in graduate school, I was on the practical side of the house, whereas many of my colleagues were on the rhetorical scholarly side of the house. So in my heart and in the fundamental, you know, in the fundamental part of me, I'm so much about what he does in his, using his persuasive speech as the why you should hire me speech. In the heart of who I am as an educator, I want my students to do that as opposed to the Monroe motivated sequence, which is, you know, as old as the hills. However, what I know as being a subject matter expert for many of the academic publishers out there, for this to be adopted, for faculty out there, and I know that Tom Jewell is out there, you know, I know that Tom Jewell is out there from New Jersey, and he's probably nodding his head. For people out there to adopt these open course materials and for them to be usable out there in the world, we have to have something in this package that is going to involve a Monroe-motivated sequence speech, or else people will not necessarily adopt it. We could not just have a speech that involves why you should hire me. We could have it in the buffet and in the menu of materials, but we could not just have that as the only persuasive speech. So that was where Phil and I had this nice marriage of materials from the technical college perspective and the, and the more quote-unquote traditional community college perspective. Phil, do you want to speak to the length of, you had originally had in your length of terms?
Well, as I mentioned, the students do 7 speeches, and in the community colleges in Washington State, the length of a quarter is generally 10 weeks, whereas in the technical colleges, it's 11 and a half or 12, which means that we have time for more speeches. And again, because our students are very practically minded and many of them don't have past experience with public speaking, it takes quite a while for some of them to really gain the self-assurance and the fluidity that is really sometimes assumed by faculty members in a college, so that if they get to speech 4 or speech 5, they're going to have achieved this usually, and then they have 6 and 7 to practice and exalt in the skills that they've developed.
And we have we're in the 10-week quarter system. So, if we did 7 speeches with information literacy, there would be no way that they would have the time with that many speeches to put together a quality, there would just be no way that they would have time to put together any kind of a quality product to develop the outline and then practice that speech. We could never get that done. And the other thing is I'm part of a fairly sizable, I'm not part of a huge department, but we have to have consensus on the number of speeches that we do. We also have a departmental rubric because we analyze the rubric and we have to report out our, it's analyzed and we report out for accreditation purposes. So that's another component. It's just bigger than just my decision.
Yeah, so, I think you'll hear from Edison shortly how this played out in fact, in reality for him and for the other students.
So it was a really interesting process just to, it was just having us come together. And again, I remember saying to Phil, boy, I bet you wish you had another instructional designer who was not a, I felt so excited that I had, that I was assigned to Phil because I was teaching public speaking. But I remember thinking, boy, I bet he wishes that he was assigned someone else.
On the contrary, I just written down on my notes here, just my luck to have an ID that teaches communication studies, and I feel so fortunate, and I've learned so much. I've enjoyed working with you.
But I think in the end, and again, this year it's a whole different experience because we have, the courses that we're working on now are they're different communication courses. But last year, we had this course that was so vast that we just were teaching in such a vastly different manner. But in the end, I feel like what we came up with was really, we came up with something that I just dare to say that when we put the final package out, when I look at the menu of opportunities for that course, I don't know, Phil, how many assignments do you think are in there? I would venture to say that there are quite a number of assignments there. Really, it's more than what you would find in a standard offering. There are so many assignments in that course. It's exciting. It's really exciting to see the number of possibilities of what a faculty member could use for adoption in that particular course. Phil, are you still there?
Oh, yeah, I'm still there, yes. Well,
how many assignments do you think, ended up going into that course?
There's a slide later in which I'll show several of them, but there are at least 4 or 5, I would say, sort of major ones that are optional. In fact, we don't even do them here every quarter, but sometimes we do. So, yes, I think part of our challenge in any introductory course is to pack as much material as we can into it so that the students will get the broadest and deepest understanding of the subject matter and the field, that whether that leads them directly to work as it does in our kind of college, or whether it leads them to transfer and perhaps majoring in communication studies in a 4-year institution.
And you ended up adding, did you tell me you ended up adding some information literacy pieces after the fact?
Yes.
How did your students respond to that?
Well, you know how it is, Ellen. I think most faculty members end up adding new things every quarter, and the reality is if you expect more of people, they generally rise to the expectations, and I think that's been the case. Edison can talk about that perhaps because he's the product of the latest pile of expectations.
We have a question that I'm just responding to. Lindsay's asking, currently instructing public speaking as a hybrid at a community college, can any of the OCL materials be integrated into Blackboard? And I just want to say, absolutely. That's the beauty of what we've put together, is that any of these materials these are just all a la carte materials that can be integrated into any LMS. They can be integrated into anything as individual assignments or as a whole package. You can pick and choose whatever you like. Yeah. So I'm ready to send this right over to you, Phil. So thank you for letting me share some of these challenges. But again, I think the takeaway is that what we put together was the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And Noreen is saying we're using the face-to-face classroom. Absolutely. I think that one of the biggest misconceptions about the Open Course Library is that this was designed for only online learning, and that it isn't. It absolutely isn't. It was designed for use for any type of teaching. It can be used for face-to-face, online. These are just teaching materials, and they can be used for any way that you teach. That's at least my perception. We did not create them for just online learning.
Right.
Great. Thank you, Ellen and Phil for
E is for everyone. I love it.
That wonderful discussion. I'm going to go ahead and send a file to folks, which allows you after the fact to do a login if you'd like, as a guest login to the master copy of the public speaking course, and that's from Phil. And you can accept that if you want the document. All right, at this point, I'd like to introduce Phil Venditti, communications professor at Clover Park Technical College. Phil has been teaching communications and public speaking for, I think, about 10 years now. Prior to that, he was a community college administrator for 15, so he's been very involved with community colleges for many years. And as Ellen mentioned earlier, he is one of the founding members of the Open Course Library team. So Phil, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you very, very much, Una. Let me go back to the, oh, I thought there was a, here we go, a video preview. The Germans say, aller Anfang ist schwer, which means all beginnings are difficult. However, I would say that in this process, the beginnings were fun, the middle is fun, the end is fun, the future is all fun. It's a very enjoyable process, and I would really like to repeat how much I enjoyed working with Ellen. It was my good fortune to have an expert in communication studies as the instructional designer who was overseeing what I was doing. Now, to give you an idea of what the course feels like, I'm going to first of all show you this video preview. This is only a 1-minute video. This was produced by Edison Justiniano. He'll tell you a little bit about the process whereby he put it together later, but I'm going to attempt to show this to you on the screen by sharing my entire desktop with you and letting you see the, let me see, I should be able to, okay, let me see, view, layout, whiteboard only. Do you, whoops, that didn't show. Do you all see, here we go. Do you all see a black thing?
Yes, we do.
All right, here we go then. Here we go. And I'm hoping you can hear this too.
And if this doesn't display on your correctly on your machine, because sometimes the videos don't because of network bandwidth, I did type the URL into the chat window, and you can take a look at that 1-minute video later on. So maybe you want to describe what we're seeing for those who might not.
Yes, this is, there is a pastiche of students being shown doing their speeches now with lots of interesting gestures, lots of smiles, and captions describing what's going on in the course. Foreign foods, I'm loving it. Bikes, politics, bam, 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 bam. Public speaking.
Your students chose their own topics.
They sort of chose their own topics. I don't think that's quite the way I would put it. What they did was they chose their topics within a variety of topics that I provided for them. So, for instance, I would ask them to do a speech about past speeches. So they had to give a speech about past speeches, but they could choose the past speeches that they wanted to talk about. So they could choose anything from a presentation by Lady Gaga that took place last week to the Gettysburg Address to the Sermon on the Mount. So I think what the course attempted to do was provide structure and freedom in some kind of balance so that there was guidance for the students and that they would pick up important skills, but they would have the latitude to experiment and express their own voices. I'll go very briefly over the first steps in creating the course. I think the main thing I'd like to say about this is that most faculty members, myself included, tend to plan our courses, even new courses, on the basis of what we have done in the past, the activities that we're used to doing, the assessments we're used to employing. But in the Open Course Library, we were implored and expected to follow a different approach, which was to start with the course objectives, to make sure that those were reasonable, logical, understandable, and complete, and then work from there toward the modules, and then the learning activities, and then the assessments that would be used to determine whether the learning activities were successful. So that structure is really the most important thing. After that, items 2, 3, 4, and 5 here describe the things that I did. I think most faculty members in the Open Course Library did something very similar. I wrote to faculty members all over the state who teach communication studies, wrote to friends who teach that field elsewhere in the country. I looked at textbooks. I looked at materials that past students in my classes here at Clover Park had produced, and I also drew upon a book that I wrote myself for building business success. And then one of the major sources of support in a public speaking class is for students to be able to see what people have done in the past, whether it's a face-to-face class or hybrid or totally online. So YouTube videos were an important part of my steps in creating the course. Then on the LMS, which is Angel, or has been Angel here in Washington State, some of the things that you'll find, I think this relates partly to what Kelvin was asking about, the course as it appears on Angel does have orientation for students, but I don't think there's anything really out there beyond Angel that would tell students, other than what I send them myself prior to an academic term. Anyway, there are speech assessment rubrics because we definitely use those as an assessment tool. Ellen mentioned that at Highline there's a departmental rubric, and I use one rubric here that I've developed through consultation with students and faculty members in many places. Then we have critique and interview forms, which I'll get to shortly, and then lots of essays, lots of articles, explanatory information from me that helps the students outside of class. Here are some examples on this slide. On the left is the instructor's rubric, which I use. Students also have a rubric they use, which is almost the same, except it doesn't have points attached to it. We also have rubrics for the students to assess guest speakers. And then on the right, where it says critique community speech, I mentioned earlier that there's a mixture of freedom and expectations in the course. One of the assignments every quarter is for the students to attend at least 3 live community speeches, which sometimes is a real hassle. It can be a real challenge for students, and yet they almost always, all of them do it. What you see there is an example of a critique of a live community speech that was done by one of our best students a couple of years ago. She heard a woman who talked about outdoor adventure, and as a result, the student, put together this critique, which has photographs in it, is very nicely formatted. So I like to think that there is the latitude for students to do things like this in response to the expectations. Then about the YouTube videos, the vast majority of the YouTube videos on the Open Course Library site in Angel are from students. There is a waiver which has been run by the Assistant Attorney General assigned to our college, which provides support for the college to make the recordings and to post them on YouTube, and also to use them in presentations like this, which explain what the Open Course Library is. So there are, I would say, 180 to 200 sample speeches on YouTube on that site. I also have YouTube videos of myself demonstrating some of the speeches, and my in-class explanations that are very spontaneous in some cases, and then there's a long series of videos that help prospective faculty members who are going to teach the course learn how to do so, from my perspective. Then interactivity, I'm going to breeze really through this. This is something that Ellen referred to earlier. These are some of the sort of menu items that might not appear in a community college public speaking class. I ask all the students for 6 of their 7 speeches to interview at least one stranger and have that person rate the student's interactivity during that conversation prior to the speech. Many of the students, usually one class per quarter, are expected to go to a Toastmasters club and arrange to give a speech to the Toastmasters. Then we have an on-off-campus student involvement project whereby the students find a staff or faculty member or administrator at the college who will take them to college events, including campus meetings and committee meetings. Then at the end of every quarter, one student at least from each section gives a speech together with others, which is why we call it multi-class, to either a Rotary Club or a Kiwanis Club or some other community organization. The OCESE is a vast, magnificent potluck event at which students read poems to each other. Among other things, they can also bring their children and friends and neighbors and other faculty members. And finally, the Public Speaking Resource Corps is a group of 15 students who have already completed the course, who are at their computers ready to receive email messages through Angel asking them about how to be successful in the course. Moving on. It's a great pleasure to introduce Edison Justiniano, one of our very best students from, in my experience, with more than 2,000. You can see he's a computer networking information systems security graduate. I don't want to take any more time from him, but it's a pleasure to have him here, and you'll soon find out why.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Edison Justiniano, and I'm going to be speaking today concerning my experience as far as the course is concerned. First, I want to talk about the difference between my expectation and the actual reality of the course itself. My expectation of the course was that, oh, this is going to be just a set topics that I have to research, and I'm going to be spending a lot of time in the library. It's just going to be a kind of dry, humdrum class. But the reality of it really hit me in the face quickly that that this class is actually going to be fun. And initially, though, it was a bit overwhelming. I would say the word would be the workload just seemed ridiculous. When Dr. Phil gave us when he gave us the syllabus, thank you, the syllabus, it just seemed very overwhelming with the 7 speeches, all the outlines that we'd have to produce, the 3 live community speeches, and initially, right off the bat, he split everybody up into different groups and told us that we were going to have to speak at a club, the Toastmasters Club, and we're just all just like the deer in the headlights look. Like, I cannot believe we have to do all this stuff. But as it turns out, it actually was not as bad as it seemed, and it actually was very helpful in preparing us as far as interviews for jobs. We did a portion of the class where we sat down and we sat before our students, and they would ask us questions as if we were in an interview process, as well as resume building. And the whole "Why You Should Hire Me" speech was a very good experience, and I actually put it as a link on my resume, and it's to me it's been very helpful. It's been a very helpful thing. The next point, the utility, ProQuest, and YouTube resources. Dr. Phil had everything set up. The materials were easily accessible, all the rubrics, the outlines, the YouTube speeches. They were all very helpful and a fun way in preparing for the speeches. The YouTube videos were very instrumental as far as getting ideas to prepare for your speeches, and they were really neat. They kind of help you get an idea of how the class was going to go and different things such as those types of things. And moving on, bonding with the classmates, it was amazing. I've never been a part of such a wonderful class environment. It was just an awesome experience, and I wouldn't take it back for anything. I'm so glad that I took the public speaking course versus the other options that I had, because the relationships that you develop in the class were just amazing. From the speeches that people gave, you really learned about one another through their personal testimonies and different things, and even within the group that you get put into, my team, we actually came up with a slogan. We said that we were the public speaking champions, Team PSC, and so it was pretty neat. Just the bond that you developed was amazing, and I really am thankful that I was a part of it. And lastly, the commemorative multimedia production experience. When we first get in the class, we have to fill out an application in order to be selected for this, and the student that's selected has to take pictures throughout the whole quarter, and we have to put together a video at the end. And it was really neat experience, and with all the other stuff going on, I kind of hesitated to even want to put in the application, but just something within me, I really like and enjoy doing these types of things. So I thought, well, I'm just going to have to make time for it. And I was selected along with another student as my aide, and we put together all the pictures and actually came up, we wanted to do something a little different, so we put together a little movie trailer as far as a little teaser before the actual video came out. And we're still actually working, the video was completed, but it was such a large file, it was like almost 4 gigs, and so we're trying to come up with different compression ways to compress it down and be able to post it on YouTube under the school website, the school channel. So that, in a nutshell, is my experience of the class, and like I said, it's been just an awesome experience working under, Dr. Phil is our instructor, and he does a great job, in my opinion, with all the students. Thank you.
I'll be paying Edison afterward for those kind comments.
Thank you, Phil and Edison. That was excellent. And Noreen had a question for you, Edison, and I'll read that for you. It says, what was different about this course that facilitated the student-to-student bonding, the group work, or was it the in-class environment, the group work, or what? And I think what Noreen is asking about more generally is sometimes community colleges are perhaps criticized for not having the same kind of student bonding experiences that one has at a residential college. So if you could answer her question about what facilitated that student-to-student bonding, the in-class environment, the group work, or any other factors.
Yes, ma'am. I would have to say the structure and the way Dr. Phil set it up, and probably the content of the speeches. For example, the first speech that we give is we have to pick a significant individual, and that really, in my opinion, just kind of opened everyone up, and they were able just to speak about people that really meant something that was significant to them, and it really just opened us all up. We just kind of laid our feelings out there to each other, and everyone, like I said, they just opened themselves up, and we just began from that point. We developed a bond with one another, and from there on, with working with one another, with helping each other with the speeches, because you have, different levels of experiences, and so people just began to just come together and work together well. It was an awesome experience. Like I said, I've never experienced anything like it. We all worked together very well, and I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Right. Thank you, Edison. At this point, I think Professor Venditti was going to just speak to what might be coming up for the course in the future.
Yeah, I'll make that very quick. Oops, I thought there was this. Yes. As people know, this is available already along with the other courses in the Open Course Library on Connections. It's been picked up by the Saylor Foundation. I've done a lot of outreach to other faculty members, including things like this, which have been really helpful to me in terms of modifying and honing the course. I'm trying to expand and improve the videos. I'm actually a very fervent supporter of open educational resources. This has gotten me started working with Flat World Knowledge on a course on small group communication, which I hope was also going to take advantage of some of the things I've learned. Then all the tinkering that people do as faculty members to make sure that their materials remain helpful and vibrant for all possible learning environments.
All right. Well, thank you.
Should we also mention, Phil, that we have a Com Studies 101 course coming?
Yes. Oh,
that
that's
we're
right.
also our part 2 of working together.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. I've almost overlooked it. We're in a slight pause now as the subject matter experts look at some of the materials that are ready to be reviewed, but absolutely, that's going to start this fall as well.
And that's the course that won the Sloan Award.
Yes.
Ellen, can you repeat the name of that course?
It's Comm Studies 101. It's Introduction to Communication. That's the course that Phil is building, and that's the course that he's building this time. He's taken he's got a lot of his own materials. He's also used some of the materials that I have had from my course, and that is the course that won the Sloan Award in 2011. That course has also met Quality Matters review within the past 3 years. So he's adopting some of those materials into his course.
Most of them, I would say, in fact, because what can you do other than borrow perfection if you can find it? Again, I feel so fortunate to be part of it.
That's kind, but he's got a lot of we're marrying a lot of those materials together, and fortunate, that's been a lot. It's been a lot less of a stretch as it was for this public speaking course. It's been a lot. That's been a lot more of a seamless transition, because that's been a lot. We teach that a lot more of the same way.
And we owe a tremendous amount, I think, also to Tom Caswell and the others at the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges here in Washington, because Phase 1 is always more difficult than Phase 2, but they have just made Phase 2 even more enjoyable, more productive, more educational, illuminating than Phase 1 was. So thanks to them.
Excellent. All right. Before we go into general questions, and I know there have been a number of questions posed and answered, and some that probably haven't been answered, I just wanted to mention our next CCCOER webinar is in June. It should be June 19th, same time, on Tuesday morning, and it's going to be on the faculty perception of OER and the pedagogy of OER and how that might be different from a traditional classroom. And we have two wonderful speakers on that, Steve Benning from Clackamas College in Oregon and Dr. Judy Baker from Foothill Community College in California. So we hope you can join us for that. I know it's finals week for some folks, and for some folks it's the start of the summer semester, but we'd love to have you, and as we always do, record these if it doesn't work into your schedule. I want to ask you one more question before we allow you to ask questions, and that is we're planning our fall webinars, our educational outreach webinars at the Community College Consortium, and I'd love to have your opinions on who you'd like to hear from. And you'll see there's 5 choices here, and if you just would click directly under the participants list, the A, B, C, D, and E. Would you like to hear from open textbook publishers about what their newest offerings are? Would you like to hear about mobile use of open educational resources? Would you like to hear about universal design and open educational resources? Would you like to hear about fostering open policies? That's D. And then our final option is, would you like to hear about other community colleges and their OER projects, which of course today was a community college OER project. It was really a statewide project, but I would say that today's presentation was probably closer to E than the previous 4 categories. So I'm just going to give you a minute. If none of the 5 suit what you'd like to see us present next fall, type something into the chat window and let me know what you're thinking about. So I've seen a little less than half of you, or maybe about half of you, have put something in there. So I'm gonna let you continue to select those, and hoping to hear more input in the chat window. Maybe you would like to see where we're coming out at. Show you your statistics. So yeah, over half of you haven't responded. So if you get a chance, do choose A, B, C, D, or E for us. All right, excellent. I want to thank all of you for attending. We had over 40 folks join us this morning. You can type directly into the chat window, or you can speak up if you're on the phone or if you have a microphone with echo canceling. And I'm looking at some of the comments here, whoa, they went by fast. Let's see. Whoops. Jackie Hood says it would be great to hear from communities from multiple colleges working together on OER. Yes, thank you, Jackie, and we are going to have some opportunities to hear more about that next fall. Jerry asks about discovery of open resources for faculty. Yes, thank you for that comment, Jerry. And you know, our May 1st webinar was on that, and if you need the information for that, please go to our website at oerconsortium.org. We have an archive of that. It's actually up on YouTube. Kathleen from Shoreline says it might be a good idea to explain what OER is for folks that are new to it. Well, that's excellent, excellent suggestion, Kathleen. All right, and we've got a few people who are taking off. So I'm going to ask people to go ahead and speak up with their questions, because we have a few more minutes here. While we're waiting for that, I do want to thank our presenters, Ellen Bremen, Phil Venditti, and Edison Justianano, for sharing this amazing public speaking course. We had a question earlier about high schools and how appropriate this material might be for use at the high schools. Ellen, did you want to speak to that one?
I believe that this material could be used absolutely in high schools. There's just no question that any of the assignments could be, I mean, if it's the why you should hire me speech, any of the demonstration speeches, without question. My students have gone to Highline High School here in Seattle. The public speaking class, the Public Speaking 220 class, has done a partnership with Highline High School, and we've also gone to Evergreen High School. We've done partnerships with both of those schools, and we've done some team teaching with them. So we've done work with them where those students have gotten up and have done speeches. So any of those projects can be done. You just take the information literacy pieces and you either use what works for your classroom, or you can eliminate them entirely if just to get the students up and speaking. I think that sometimes that's even more important, just to get them up and doing it. So just either integrate or don't integrate, whatever you think works.
Two other things that we've done in the course here are, one, we've gone to the alternative high school and had our students and their students do an impromptu speaking competition just in their classroom, where they would draw topics out of a bowl and have to speak about them for 1 to 2 minutes. That was very successful. And the other one I've already forgotten, but I'll probably remember it later. Another partnership within our college has been with our ABE, GED, ESL students who have come to our classes, and we've gone to theirs, and our students have done speeches about the ESL and ABE students. So I think one of the benefits of public speaking in general is that it can be valuable to people of any age and at any stage of the educational continuum.
All right, thank you, Ellen and Phil. I just wanted to bring up a question that was actually answered in the chat window, but for those of you who might not have seen it, we had a question from Sandra about the accessibility and the compliance with ADA and Section 508, and thank you, Tom, for answering that question. All of the Open Course Library has been reviewed for compliance with ADA and was designed with support for accessibility in mind. So that's a great question, Sandra. We also had a question from Noreen about research on effectiveness of Course Library, and I'm not sure if that was answered. Let me see. Noreen asks, will there be research available on how the Open Course Library materials are being used and their effectiveness?
Yeah, I think that's something. I believe Tom has left, but he is the one who's overseeing that kind of research. And in phase 1, we had at least two institutional researchers who were preparing surveys and other methods of checking those very kinds of things out. So I'm sure data are being developed as we speak, probably.
Yes.
Oh, Tom's still there. Sorry.
I think Tom Jewell left.
All right, so Tom, if you want to answer more about the research that's being done about the effectiveness of the Open Course Library. Oh, thank you. Jackie Hood has shared a set of recorded webinars that include definitions on finding and creating webinars. Finding and creating OER, which was done by SoftChalk, which I know a number of folks on the Open Course Library have used for material development. One other question I saw that was flying around was
Tom
about...
asked if he could grab the microphone for the research question.
Yes, go ahead. Tom, you should be able to speak to it, to the microphone. Sorry about that. While Tom is typing about the research that they're doing, I know a number of people were asking how many weeks the public speaking course was designed for. And so maybe, Ellen, you could speak to if there's a certain number of modules, or what was the approximate length that it was designed for originally?
You know, again, it is a menu of materials. When Phil put together the course guide, he gives a guideline of a way that it could be taught. But the beauty of this is that faculty can pick and choose the assignments and the assessments that make sense for them, and they can fit it into the system or the weeks or the format that works for them. They could use it in whatever format works for their whatever semester or quarter or number of weeks works with their institution.
An example of this, for instance, is we have two of the informative speeches, informative speeches have to do with speeches that the students have encountered. One is about past or historical speeches, and the other is about those live community speeches. But if a faculty member doesn't have time to do both of them, they could easily pick one or the other, and thereby save about a week or 10 days of the academic term in order to get everything else done.
Okay, thank you for answering that. I'm just going to repeat what Tom had to say here about research. So this is Tom Caswell, who's the project manager for the Open Course Library. He said, we have done preliminary research comparing the student completion rates of the first 42 course pilots with statewide averages for those courses. We found no significant differences, meaning students are spending 90% less money when they use OCL materials, and they perform just as well. So that's great preliminary research, Tom, and I know that you are working on more for this next wave. Yes, they are doing qualitative research on OCL course use in phase 2.
With respect to the question about corporate training, I might point out that some of my background before I started teaching in two-year colleges was corporate training, especially with powerful presentations and that sort of thing. So many of the elements of the courses I teach here at Clover Park owe their existence to my experience there. I have adopted things and have avoided things on the basis of what did or didn't work there.
All right. Thank you, Phil, for that, and Jim for that question. I think we'll be here for a few more minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop those in the window or speak up. All right. I want to thank everyone who attended this morning, and once again, I want to thank our presenters, Ellen, Phil, and Edison, for their time and their inspiration on this wonderful project. All right, I'm going to turn off the recorder.